Hi everyone, Michelle Fix It. Today is December 22nd, 2023. I am out and about in the evening, late hours. Baltimore City running errands. I hope that everyone had a fantastic, fantabulous Christmas. Ooh, I'm driving without my lights on. Now I'm driving with my lights on. And, yeah, so Big Sexy, I still have to change out her back tail light. I'm going to do a little video for you guys on that. That's why we have that annoying beeping sound going on. Just kind of basking in the glow of the holiday season. Finishing up last minute chores. On my way to Georgetown. I'm passing the house for the gentleman who is a homeowner. I haven't passed it, I'm sitting right next to it. He's a homeowner. His house caught on fire, and the current temperature is 37 degrees according to Big Sexy, and I feel really, really badly for him because he's an older gentleman, has owned his home for years and years. He inherited it from his mother, from what I've been told and then can see on SStat. And being on a fixed income, fairly confident that's why he didn't have homeowners insurance on it, because even if you are fortunate enough to own your own home, sometimes you're not fortunate to be able to maintain insurance whenever you're on a fixed income. So basically, some time ago, the house burned down. Family took him in for a little while, and then he started renting a room somewhere. He had a dog and a cat. I think they've been rehomed because he couldn't keep them with family, and then he couldn't keep them in the room. And the little birdies that whisper about stuff are thinking that he's now in that home. It was first said that he thought people were squatting in it. And because he's older and because he's proud and he's scared, I told him that I would help secure the home, so my labor is free for me, and that he would just have to pitch in for materials and stuff because, I don't have all the money in the world, but I will divvy out my time appropriately when someone's in need. And he declined on that, and I think it's just because he's nervous, because out here, much like other places as well, you're apprehensive to take help from someone because they may try to hold it against you, they may try to charge you for it. And so I have a mental note to try to touch base with him again, because a few people told him that there were programs and grants and loans and stuff like that, and whenever I ran that down because no one was answering the phone, as it turns out, all the funding for the different programs, according to the gentleman that I saw at the place that's all they do, all that funding has been already appropriated to other things, and so they're out of funding. So hopefully I can try to help a little bit, because I'm very nervous that once we do start getting into freezing temperatures, I don't know how well that house is going to provide shelter without any utilities in it. And desperate times call for desperate measures, and that's probably his mentality, is that if he doesn't move in, even though it's absolutely not hospitable for human life at this point, then someone else is going to try to take it over again, even though it's not. I think it's been condemned. It had a big sign on there. I think it was a condemning sign. So, I don't know. Maybe at some point I'll be popular enough to be like, hey, let's start a GoFundMe account, or let's help, because I see that with people that have social media accounts, that once they have enough little subscriber people, they can make things happen. And I see people, stopping random people and giving them $500 or $1,000, but that's not like something that's going to be sustainable. It's not. It helps them for that one situation. And if I ever could be popular enough to draw funding and attention to certain things, I would do it for home ownership. You know, I saw an article the other day, and this is just me randomly talking, so if you come across my video, you know, like, why is this girl just randomly talking? It's just what it is. I'll flip you guys around so that you don't have to stare at me. But I saw an article the other day that I really liked, and I've seen a few different ones. So one of the articles that I saw was Black women empowering Black women with home ownership. And so they procure houses, like the organization purchases houses, and then they all work on it. Like a bunch of different volunteers work on it, and then they sell the house to, they also, you know, teach the women how to work on their finances and stuff like that, and teaching them the basics of, you know, home mechanics, I guess you could say, on everything that you have to do in order to keep a property up and running and in good repair. And the question I have for it is, you know, one, they have to be in a situation where they can acquire a loan. Is how much of a profit does that organization make off of each home? And then what about the people that don't have that? Like, it would be great if there was a program where, like I've talked about it in other videos, the possibility of home ownership programs, as long as, you know, you wouldn't have to go through a lengthy foreclosure process in the event that it didn't work out. Because I think that a lot of like small mom and pop landlords that are kind of over getting ridiculous calls, because it does go both ways. You know, you have the landlord special people, but then you also have the I think they call them career tenants or something, where all they do is just basically look for the next person to mess over. So I mean, I've seen both sides of it. But I think if other small-time landlords had a possibility of, you know, you purchase this home, you know, you put deposits down, not deposits, but you put down payments and incremental things, and you fulfill these obligations, and, like, you know, I'll give you a little bit of my time to help resolve problems, but otherwise, like, this is your home, and I hold the deed and the title until, you know, you fulfill the loan. I think that'd be a great way to build generational wealth. And then as landlord protection, you know, if they don't fulfill those obligations, then they get turned back into tenants, and then you go through the eviction process that you'd have to go through anyways. I think it would be, you know, a really good meet in the middle situation. The other thing that I saw, as far as an article, it was somewhere in the UK. It was an article, and then they actually did a little blurb too with interviews and stuff, where it was helping each other with their gardens, and that's why I knew that it was like a UK or Europe thing, because we call here in the States, in the US of A, we call them backyards or yards. We don't call them gardens. We call gardens, which is totally different for us, much like the debate on football versus soccer and football. But anyways, it's basically like you have, say, 12 volunteers, and so the 12 volunteers will show up, and they do a grand plan of making the homeowners' gardens' dreams a reality. And all the people that are volunteering their time, so that, like, the next time they do it, their garden will be improved with volunteers. And why can't we do something like that, where, you know, we have families, women, families, whatever, and, you know, it's like, okay, well, if you volunteer your time here, then when we need, you know, hours of someone helping, we'll help with yours. And that would make it cheaper, because one of the things that kind of frustrates me is a lot of the programs that people talk about as being fantastic programs, you have to be fortunate enough to be able to acquire funds for a traditional loan of some sort, and a lot of people just don't have that in the cards, and so that really limits it, because, you know, whether it's the small towns that are shriveling up because they have a lot of flight for bigger areas so that they can make more money, things like that. And then you start having dilapidated houses and blighted communities, and it's a downward spiral because you just don't have the population, and then the city or the town becomes poorer and poorer. You have similar situations happen in the big city where, you know, you have so many houses that are empty, and then the other piece of it is that you have so many people that are homeless. And homeless people make the best of what they have available. I mean, I don't understand why there's such a disconnect where it's the quality of life improvement, you know? And now I'm going to have to talk about something else once I get past this subject, where if you have a homeless family or a homeless man or a homeless, you know, couple or something like that, and they're living in an abandoned car because that's how dire their situations are, because there's not always substance abuse in play for some of these situations, or they're living in their car, or they're living in a tent. I mean, there's so many different pieces to this, and this is one of the reasons why I'm such a big advocate of actually owning what you have. And if the minimal setup for that is a vehicle, where, you know, if you lost your job tomorrow and you lost your rented apartment, house, condo, townhouse, whatever, you would still have some type of minimal shelter over your head. Then nobody can take that car away from you, because, you know, once you own it, you just have to pay your registration fees, your insurance, things like that. Of course, fuel, maintenance, but it's some type of shelter over you. So if people are in those dire situations, and then, you know, there's some type of funding, grant, whatever, because how much money do we put into resources of trying to, let's be honest, you have some places where they just basically arrest the homeless people for whatever thing, or how many organizations are funding, you know, just getting these people okay for a little while. What if we just started cycling some of that stuff into home ownership, where, you know, as long as it's relatively okay, you know, somebody puts down the few $1,000s to purchase the house. And yes, there are areas where you can purchase a house for a few $1,000s. And the grant says, okay, we will cover the taxes for this property for 2 years. So you have 2 years of, this is a better situation than you being in a tent or you being in your vehicle. And whatever money you have, you can start putting into this property because you own it, and the taxes are covered for 2 years. Because that in itself should be enough to start to stabilize a person, a couple, or a family. And yes, the house would not be perfect and pristine, but when you're dealing with when you hit the bottom, and the bottom is you living in a tent, or you know, keeping a little hovel of trash around you for warmth, and you're out there in the elements, is it less humane to purchase some type of property that you can actually start doing stuff with? Oh, and I don't know, let's double down and say, hey, if you've been accepted in this program, then what we're going to do is, you know, from noon until 2, you can show up for a free course on how to do these things. Or, I don't know, we have this wonderful thing called YouTube, you know, might have heard of it, might be on it currently, where it's like, they have the government free phones that have data plans. So you have your government free phone, you have your property that, you know, is probably very blighted at this point, but it's yours, so it's your blighted property. Go on YouTube. If you can't have the funding to make classes to teach the people basically to fish, like that's one of my big things, is let's teach people to fish. And you can remove the religion from it. Teach people how to take care of themselves. Because clearly this system that we have adopted of mom and dad have the nuclear family, they raise the children, and everything is perfect and clean, is not working. What if mom is dealing with substances and dad's incarcerated? And so, you know, mom is lucky enough to have family that cares about the bright, shiny little baby, to keep the baby somewhat stabilized for a little while into toddlerhood, into pre-K, and then we we expect the schools to kind of pick up the pieces. And then when that child goes home, mom's on her substances, or dad, whatever, the parent or the grandparent that's taking that role. Because I've seen a lot of stuff out here, and it's just really frustrating. And so then the child grows up in an impoverished situation without a lot of resources, because let's face it, most of the time, whenever we have this perpetual state of chaos being the upbringing for the child, it gets worse and worse unless they have some type of exposure to positive things, whether that's a teacher, a mentor, a neighbor that takes this child under the wing. But then we get all nervous because now we have we have always had predators among us, but then you have predators, so then you're worried about that, so then the child gets a little bit isolated. It's a whole never-ending cycle. So I mean, if we start covering some of these basics, then maybe things will get a little bit better. Because speaking as someone that, grew up in a divorced home, that didn't really horribly affect me. My mom was a single mom, and my parents did the best that they could in a non-nuclear setting. And speaking as someone that, is the one of the heads of a blended family, we're doing pretty decently. And when I see these children out here and they don't have that, because it is a very real, factual part of life for them, where, mom might have substance issues or mental health issues or physical health issues or whatever. And the children basically have to caretake themselves. And then we wonder why the children get worse. It's because no one is stepping up and parenting. So what if we start plucking these situations and say, you know what? Let's offer some stability. Let's empower whoever is in control of these children, whether it's mom, dad, auntie, uncle, grandmother, grandfather. Let's give them stabilized housing that they can work on. And, and it's not a subsidized rental program that's here as long as the children are here, or, as long as you're following in line. Why don't we have it where people are actually purchasing their houses, whatever crappy level that they're in, especially with the homeless, population, and it's theirs. They're going to have that pride in ownership. They're going to be excited that they actually are able to, even if they have to set up a tent inside their house like they would outside. It's better than what they had, and it gives them a little bit of control over their lives instead of waiting for the police or whomever to tear down their tented thing, or having to, go through a crime thing and, just to make ends meet. Because I've seen a lot out here, and it's really sad, because a lot of it is a lot of basic problems that just are not being taken care of. And this area is very unique too, because everyone has the state health insurance. So, medically they could go all over the place, but then because it's completely free, they don't realize that people that have to pay for insurance have to pay a substantial amount of money for that health insurance each month. And then they have co-pays and deductibles and all these other things. And so they kind of don't realize how much they could utilize their medical care and get themselves in the best situation possible. And then the other disconnect that I see is that once you're able to get on, Social Security or something like that, then you have this intent of never wanting to work, because if you do work, then your benefits could be cut down. And I think that's something that needs to be adjusted and talked about as well. Or, the temporary cash allowance thing. It's the same thing. It's as long as you're not working, we're going to give you money. It's very minimal money. So you're not going to have enough money to actually raise your children properly. But then if, they were given more money, then, they would, I don't know what they would do. It would be dependent on that person. But we're basically raising children in environments of never being able to better their quality of life, not giving them the exposure that they need. And we're wondering why things get worse with certain populations. We're completely discounting the fact that, if you were fortunate enough to grow up in a blended family, or a family that had home ownership, that home is somewhere that is always a home, a falling back point and stuff like that. But then the other piece that I was trying to get back to is that because we were trying to overly protect some dynamics of the people, I guess, if I took in a cousin and let them stay on my sofa for 3 days, and then I tried to ask them to leave. In some areas, they would have to leave because they've been there less than the amount of time. In some areas, if they've been there for 5 days, now I have to go through a formal eviction process. So I can't even take anyone under my care, under my roof, and keep them from going on the street without fear of having to formally evict them because of overprotections. Just like we have laws for Good Samaritans and things like that, I think that we should have some type of clause where if me and that person sign a thing and it says, hey, we understand that this person is going to be here for a short amount of time and this person is not setting up residency tenancy, or even if they have a piece or 2 pieces of mail, then they have to be formally evicted. It makes it where people are less inclined to help other people for fear that they're going to have to incur legal fees or get legal representation to get that person out of their home if they are so gracious to try to offer support. So we're blocking off so many different areas of this, and it's just very frustrating because I've also personally experienced those situations. So when you overly complicate very simple concepts such as homelessness, pride in ownership, trying to empower families with children so that the children in that generation excels, being a good host. When you overly complicate basic concepts, you're doing a disservice and you're fundamentally starting to divide a method of being able to assist people in an appropriate way that doesn't stunt their growth and doesn't make them completely dependent upon you. Because I would like to be able to have someone stay under my roof and not be on the streets for a couple days or a couple of weeks without having to worry about going to a court to get them out when I was trying to do them a favor. Because some people will not take anyone under their roofs because they are scared of the repercussions of that. So you're tying the hands of the people that want to help. And we're becoming such a renter country, where it is the principle of the wealthy get more wealthy. Because just like those the check cashing places make tons of money off of people that don't have enough money, or interest rates or any of that stuff, we've made a system where it's very difficult to get ahead. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. And it doesn't matter how much of a go-getter you are, because I'm a go-getter. And statistically, I shouldn't have been able to achieve a lot of the things that I did, and I'm very proud of myself for those things, and I will toot my own horn. But I know that that's an anomaly, because statistics show that I shouldn't have been able to do those things. Shouldn't have been able to achieve those milestones. So, I personally think that one of the big issues is there are a lot of them. We have the home ownership issues. We have the homelessness issues. We have a lot of different issues. We have a lot of issues with people being less inclined to help other people because of fear. Just food for thought in my random little drive, on my random little errands. You guys have a fantastic night. I'll see you next time. And I'm sure somebody's going to be like, why are you just rambling while you're driving? Because I can. Because this is a free country and I have a channel to ramble all of my random rambleness. And if I just wasted almost 25 minutes of your time, thanks for listening to me. If you have things to talk about in addition to this stuff, lay it out there in the comments. But just know that if you're grumpy or mean, you're going to get deleted, because it's just, I don't have time for that stuff. I have too many things on my plate. But you guys have a great night, a fantastic day, a great day. And if you're in a low spot, ask me for help. I will give you a video or some comments, and because I care. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to offer insight if people want to hear it. See you next time. Bye.